In today's video, we have tons of news to discuss, including some trade rumors focusing on the Ottawa Senators, the Calgary Flames, Vancouver Canucks, Boston Bruins, Edmonton Oilers, and Montreal Canadiens. We have a signing in Edmonton. We have other big news in Ottawa regarding a new addition to their front office. We're going to recap last night's action, several injury updates, and more from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to start with here today. Let's start with the news from the NHL waiver wire. We have a player on waivers in Edmonton, and that decision is to make room for a signing. The Edmonton Oilers have today placed defenseman Markus Niemelainen on waivers, and that is to make room for Adam Erne. They've signed Adam Erne to a one-year contract at $775,000. Niemelainen will be demoted upon clearing waivers, assuming he does at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. It has also been a fairly eventful day already. In case you missed it, there is a video on the channel already, but we get the big news that the Avalanche have extended Toews 7-year contract at $7.25 million average annual value. That's an absolute steal. Obviously a great contract extension. I did cover that in a little bit more in-depth analysis, looking at the overall cap situation with the Avalanche in the next couple of years and what it means to the roster and all that. They do have as much as this is a phenomenal contract and a good team-friendly deal, they do have a ton of money tied up and are pretty up against the cap for next year already. So we'll have to examine how that's going to impact things, and I did already take a look at things in that other video if you haven't already had a chance to check it out. Several other news and notes from around the league today. We got another fine in the NHL from last night's action. Flyers forward Garnet Hathaway has been fined $5,000 for a kneeing incident that happened against Columbus and defenseman Zach Werenski. Werenski, unfortunately, was injured on the play. He's going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks. He's classified as week-to-week right now with a quadricep contusion. So that's, he's dealt with a lot of injuries in the past couple of years, so that's unfortunate to see. Thankfully, it's not super long-term. It certainly looks like it could have been worse in the beginning, so I think that's a little bit of a escaping of a worse situation. In the interim, David Jiricek of the Columbus Blue Jackets have been looking for a way to get back on the roster, has been recalled. As we've talked about in recent days, the Jackets are looking to trade a defenseman to get Jiricek on the roster on a more permanent basis. Unfortunately, there's just not enough room right now with Werenski's injury. That solves things on a short-term basis, but longer term, they're still looking to move a guy, probably like an Adam Boqvist, or between Boqvist or Bean or Peak, one of those guys likely is going to move. I think Boqvist is the most likely scenario, but we'll see how the Blue Jackets work on that here in the coming days. Some other injury updates as well. Tyler Mott with Tampa, who has not suited up yet. He missed their opener. He's been upgraded to out indefinitely, so there's no clear-cut timeline on when Mott's going to be able to play for Tampa. So that's not the way he wanted to start his tenure there with the Lightning. Taylor Hall was injured as well in the game against the Bruins. And he was basically blindside hit from Brandon Carlo is what it was. He's been considered week to week as well. I know I seen Luke Richardson today say he was pleased with the progress he's made in a brief amount of time so far, and that the week-to-week situation might be upgraded to day-to-day. So it may not be as long as they originally thought, but Taylor Hall is going to miss probably a few games. Chicago is in Montreal and Toronto here over the weekend. So the Connor Bedard show continues to roll on. He's already had a chance to go head-to-head against Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh. And then, of course, against the Bruins and Brad Marchand, and now they're obviously on the road and playing Montreal and Toronto. So he's hitting all the big markets and getting tons of media attention, which I'm sure the league is loving right now. Another injury update as well for a player who hasn't yet to suit up. The Kings forward Victor Arvidsson. He's also going to be out longer term. They are placing him on LTIR, which allowed them to recall some other players and kind of manipulate their roster a little bit, which allowed them to get a full roster on the books here, because they were obviously another team that we're concerned about playing short, but ultimately they've got some guys up now from the minor leagues or will not have to deal with that anymore. Last night's action, we saw Alexis Lafreniere get off to a great start, scoring the first goal of the season for the Rangers, and the Rangers went on to a 5-1 victory over the Buffalo Sabres. The season debut for Devin Levi between the pipes. Things didn't really go as planned for the Sabres in their home opener. The Rangers pretty well dominated that game, pretty well start to finish. I did see most of it, and for the most part, the Sabres definitely have some things to clean up on, but the Rangers really took it to them last night. The Minnesota Wild started things off with a Gus the Bus shutout. So Gustafsson starts off strong, shutting out the Florida Panthers 2-0. So a big win there and a big showing from Gustafsson, who carries over the success from last year to start off this year. Another shutout as well with UC Saros and the Predators shutting out the Kraken 3-0. So a great performance there. Dallas beat St. Louis 2-1 in a shootout. That was a tight, close game. The Flyers beat the Jackets 4-2. Of course, we talked about that game earlier where Werenski got hurt. So the Flyers got a few goals from guys like Travis Konecny, Cam Atkinson, so that's good to see as well. Couturier was on the score sheet for the first time in a long time, and overall it was a pretty solid night of hockey. The Devils also, and Jack Hughes had 2 goals to start the season. Alex DeBrincat scored in his first goal with the Red Wings, but ultimately the Red Wings beat Detroit 4-3. So it was a pretty good night of hockey. Tonight we only have 2 games, including another rendition of Sidney Crosby versus Alex Ovechkin. It's the 66th time in their careers that they're going head-to-head starting tonight, and there's of course all kinds of great action for the weekend. Now, a bunch of other updates around the NHL in Ottawa. We had reported yesterday that Shane Pinto had arrived in Ottawa over the weekend and had been seen skating and training with a skating coach at the Sensplex. That's already changed. He is now upped and gone back home to New York. The rationale behind it, from what we're being told by reporters, is that he kind of felt like it was kind of garnering too much attention. And you know what? Maybe it showed him too eager to sign, and maybe not great for his side of the negotiations either. But ultimately, maybe he thought he could kind of fly under the radar. And, there's the skating coach that kind of came highly recommended from Claude Giroux, which he wanted to be able to take advantage of, and he did for a couple of days. But ultimately, there's videos being popping up of fans spotting him in the Sensplex, and like he said, it just was more of a sideshow that he didn't want it to turn into that. So at this point, there is belief that the Sens and Pinto's camp basically have an agreement on a 2-year deal, but Pierre Dorion right now still seems to be unwilling to pay the prices to make a trade. We've heard Joseph's name, we've heard Brandstrom's name out there. They need to get something done here ASAP. This is dragging on way too long. Obviously, Pinto wants to be back, and they need to get him in action. If they have a poor start to the year, like if they have 2 games this weekend at home, Flyers and Tampa, if they drop both those games and start 0-3, there's going to be some people feeling the heat already, and it wouldn't be shocking if we saw a knee-jerk reaction early on. We have new ownership, new president, and there's not going to be much patience here to get this team from having more success right off the rails. The sooner they make a change, if they need to, the faster they can try to correct the issues that the other people that are still in charge haven't really done yet. Dorian needs to get Pinto in the lineup, and obviously DJ Smith needs to work with this team on how to properly defend, which has been something that's been lacking for a number of years. So we'll see where things go in Ottawa. That's the update there. Elliot Friedman's reporting that the Calgary Flames have re-engaged with their players that are pending UFAs, like Elias Lindholm, Noah Hannafin, and Chris Tanev. At this point, they're feeling a little bit more hopeful and optimistic that they might be able to get at least some or all of these guys signed to stick around with the Flames. There was a lot of, dark clouds over this team in the offseason. They might have a mass exodus out of Calgary, with obviously Toffoli wanting a trade. We heard Backlund wanted out, or at least, the very least, didn't want to sign. And all 3 of these guys were kind of feeling like they were hesitant to sign too. We heard Hannafin was definitely not. And now everything's kind of back into, well, we're willing to listen. So at least that's good news. Obviously, the Backlund signing kind of changed everything, and the other guys are saying, okay, well, if he's staying, we need to look at it too. The team's having good conversations. We'll see where it goes. When Lindholm, the Friedman said that there's no doubt the team will be using the new Mark Scheifele contract as leverage to try to get Lindholm around an $8.5 million mark where they'd be more comfortable. Reports are that he's looking for over 9. So there's still a fairly big gap between the Flames and Lindholm and his agent, which is why they don't, hasn't been any word that they're close, right? When it comes to Noah Hanifin, Chris Tanev, we don't really know exactly where things stand with them. Hanifin went from definitely not re-signing to willing to at least entertain it. So obviously the longer things drag on with these guys, there's still a possibility we could see 1 or 2 of them be traded. I don't know. A lot of it's going to depend on how the season goes for the Flames as well. We know Craig Conroy, the new GM, made it clear that he did not want to see players leaving for nothing. So we'll have to see how he tackles this. But ultimately, the negotiations, or at least they're ongoing, which is positive and good. But at this point, there's still a major gap on Lindholm. We don't know where things stand on the 2 defensemen, and it could still result in trades later. But certainly, situations worth monitoring. At least the Flames are feeling optimistic, which is good. Of course, in Montreal as well, there's lots of details and reports suggesting that the Habs are really hoping that we can see a healthy, productive season from Sean Monahan. Belief is they obviously allowed him to sign a 1-year deal to remain with the team to hopefully have that good comeback season so he can be traded at the deadline. I don't think personally that Monahan fits with the Habs long term. Obviously, it's a bit of a project to kind of get him back on track. They saw an opportunity to take advantage of the situation where Calgary had to shed money. Back last offseason, they did that. He was having a good start to the year, got hurt again. Obviously, his next contract is going to be dependent on it. Montreal brought him back knowing what they do about the situation. But, if he can't stay healthy or has trouble being productive, that could pose an issue. So I think Montreal is, like I said, they're really hoping to take this and turn it into more future assets. I don't think that Monahan is going to be a guy who extends and sticks around long term with Montreal. To me, he doesn't line up with the rest of the group and where things are going. But I think it's one of the names that we could be watching for this year at the deadline. That could be a sneaky good move if he can have a healthy, productive year. So he's not the only one. Christian Dvorak falls in that same category. Obviously, at this point, though, Dvorak's a ways away from playing. I don't think either of these guys are going to be traded anytime soon. But I can see both of them potentially being deadline acquisitions for teams, depending on where things are at and what the asking prices are. They could be a couple centermen that might be proven to valuable trade chips. In Boston hockey now, and writer Jimmy Murphy wondering, with the rough start the Edmonton Oilers had in the 8-1 loss to the Canucks, certainly question marks are still hanging over goaltending between Jack Campbell, Stuart Skinner. Neither really had a good game. At the end of the day, is Ken Holland going to be forced to try to make a move to upgrade? I mean, it's going to be awfully hard to do if he does. But I've seen reports before leading into the season that if Campbell and Skinner, if they get poor goaltending in the first month of the season and things are not going well, that they're not going to be waiting long before they try to make an upgrade. The article in Boston Hockey Now wonders if they would talk to the Bruins, considering they have 2 solid goaltenders. Now, their sources say that the Oilers did approach the Bruins in the offseason, talking about potential deals involving one of their goaltenders. So certainly there's interest. Obviously things didn't get very far. As we mentioned before, I think the Bruins were willing to listen on their goaltenders to maybe move one, but at the same time weren't really set on doing it either. They're quite content to keep both, but if they could find a way to free up some cap space and upgrade other areas of the team, especially at the center position, I think they would consider it. But it's a nice luxury to have for sure. And right now, they're one of the few teams who have their number 2 goalie be as valuable as he is, really, at the end of the day. So, would Edmonton call Boston looking for a potential deal if things don't work out? They certainly would. I don't know what the Bruins would ask for or what they would really be willing to entertain, though, is the problem. I think for the Oilers, they'd have to move Campbell for starters, and they're not going to move Campbell without a sweetener. So that's going to be challenging itself, and that I would suspect that goalie wouldn't be like Campbell wouldn't be the guy going to the Bruins, right? They're not going to be wanting to downgrade. So if they move a guy, they're going to want good value in return. And the Oilers do have some interesting young players that I can see Boston maybe liking. But at the same time, it's just hard to imagine how that could work out. But I can understand why they would inquire. But difficult to figure out how everything would line up to make a trade happen. Of course, in Vancouver, we know Connor Garland has asked for a trade, and it's something that he's been wanting for some time. Changed agents recently. Some more updates between Elliotte Friedman and Rick Dhaliwal of Vancouver media as well, talking about the scenario today. Dhaliwal says that essentially a lot of teams, from what his sources are telling him, that they view Garland as being closer to a $3 million player, closer to $5. So they feel he's overpaid. So we did hear from Friedman that the Canucks, he believed, are willing to retain some money, but where there is some term left, they're not going to want to retain too much. Obviously, that's not ideal, but at the same time, if they can free up some space and free up a roster spot, they're certainly open to that. I know the Jackets were a name that came up as a potential landing spot because they're looking to move a defenseman. The Canucks, at this point, we know they'd love to upgrade and find a defenseman to play in the top 4. If that can't happen, then, or if it's not a perfect deal, which is probably going to be challenging, then the belief is if they moved Garland, then it might have to be for future-based assets, might have to be for picks or prospects. It's really difficult to say. Obviously, at this point, if Vancouver's willing to retain some money, that will certainly help get things done, but it's hard to imagine. Now, in the past, there's been some teams that have had interest in Garland. There was a long link with the Bruins. I don't know if that really makes sense right now for them, but the main team that the Elliotte Friedman brought up was the Nashville Predators. So the Predators, he said, have the cap space. He feels that he would be a type of player that Barry Trotz would really like for Nashville. So if, we could see those two teams talk. Obviously, Nashville, it's hard to say. Would they consider trading a defenseman? I don't know if there's really a defenseman on the roster that the Canucks would really want. I know I've heard the name of Dante Fabro in the past as being a name that they would entertain moving. Or do they do it more for future-based prospects and just take it as a pure cap relief? Because that's possible too. Nashville's one of the teams who could take that player on without having a huge amount go out the other way, which is problematic, right? You don't have a lot of teams with cap space. You need somebody to go off of each roster to make a deal work. It makes things a lot more complicated, but in this scenario, it may not be. So when the Canucks do get around to moving Connor Garland, look for the Nashville Predators to be a potential landing spot. That is all your updates for today, so certainly let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.